So now let's talk a little bit about how to improve 2D and 3D graphics. So first off, ModelPort is designed to automatically clean up the graphics for 2D and 3D when you import the object, okay? So as you kind of see with this example here that I showed earlier as well, when we import a SketchUp or DAE object, we'll often see this kind of really sort of triangulated, messy graphics in 2D, right? And so when we import the object, it will clean it up, and that's what you see with ModelPort on the right-hand side, right? It looks really good. Now, in addition to that, if we go to 3D, you'll see that it does the same thing in 3D, right? So the ModelPort object is going to look much cleaner. It's going to get rid of all that triangulation on those polygons, and it's going to look like a much better object. Now, you can also convert objects to morphs to improve graphics as well. So you'll remember earlier I mentioned that you could bring in a Revit object, right? Using Archicad's kind of standard merge from file, the standard Archicad process of importing and converting a Revit RFA object into an Archicad object, and then you could bring that into ModelPort. You can do the same thing with SketchUp. So what I'm going to show you here is by using this kind of process of interoperability, merge from file, right? We can then, once it's placed, let me go back to that. Here we go. You can select your SketchUp file. You can bring that in and place that, right? And when you place that, it's going to convert to that SketchUp file, and it may take a minute, it may take 5 seconds, depending on how busy or how big it is, and lots of different things, but nonetheless, it's converted it, but we have a very messy object because it has a lot of curves to it. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that object and right-click it, and then I'm going to say Convert Selection to Morph. Now, what this is allowing me to do is it's going to convert that to a morph, and so it's going to kind of get rid of all that triangulation, right? And now it's just going to show these as morph elements, and so it's going to clean it up in a sense. But if I were to not have this in ModelPort, it would still look cluttered, right? But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it into ModelPort. You can see now there at the bottom left that the 2D symbol has been cleaned up. And so that's the whole point here, is we can very quickly and very easily, even if the object is not a format that we support in ModelPort, we can still use ModelPort to help clean up and manage objects through the import from Archicad option as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can update that object preview. Here's a good example where we brought an object in. And so if we want to change that object to maybe a different view, we can click that little button here, say Update Preview Image. And when we do that, and we now open up those object settings, we'll update first the object. And we're going to update that object. We're going to double click the object settings, and we can see now that that preview has been updated for the object. So that's, again, part of this process, right? To be able to go through and really, have a nice library that has these preview of the objects, and you don't have to go through a lot of background to actually do that. Okay, let me talk about another process here. This is how you would customize symbols by converting the object to GDL. Okay, so in ModelPort, we have the ability to set it to a ModelPort format, to a GDL format, or to a GDL with ModelPort format. And I'll talk about those in more detail in a second, but in specifics, if you look down here in the bottom right corner here, you can see those 3 options right here, okay? So we set to GDL, then what it's going to be is that's kind of the standard Archicad scripting and format that's used for all the objects, right? The ModelPort is our proprietary format that has a lot of advantages, which I'll also talk about again in a few more minutes. But the idea here is if you set it to the GDL format, right, and you click the Update button, then what it's going to do is it's now going to be a GDL object. So I can now select that object. I can select the File menu, and I can select Libraries and Objects and Open Object. Now, when I do this, it's going to open it up into Archicad's native library part editor, okay, where we can edit the object in the sort of the GDL environment that is sort of the background environment for objects. It will come up with this one warning down here in the bottom left. It says the library part was created with an external editor. You can change it with Archicad, but these changes will be lost if you edit it with its own editor later. So what that's meaning is that, and I'll talk about this in a second, is that it's going to convert this to GDL, right? And then if we try to take it back into model port again later, it's going to get rid of these edits we're going to do to the 2D symbols. So if you want to edit that object beforehand, kind of get it to the exact materials you want, and so forth, then you can take kind of at that point, edit the symbol further to try to get, if there's still some editing you want to do the symbol. So now that we open it up, this is the library part editor, if you've not seen that before. And you'll notice there's a bunch of options here on the left-hand side. Details, parameters, migration. We're not going to go into all those. We're going to keep this really simple. And we're just going to go down to the 2D button down there. And we're going to click that. When we click that, we're going to see, this 2D script here. This gets created by ModelPort automatically. And all we need to do is just select that script and what's called comment. You can see there on the right, there's a little red, a little button right here. If we click that button with everything selected, it'll put a little comment in front of it. What that does is it basically makes that script inactive. Okay, so it's no longer going to use the default ModelPort symbol that it created. It's instead going to allow you to now edit that symbol. So now that we've done that, we now click the 2D symbol button toward the bottom of that library part editor, as you can kind of see in the dashed red line below. And that will open up our 2D symbol view where you can see we can edit. In fact, if you now look at our toolbar to the left there, under document, we now have the ability to use text, lines, circles, fills, splines, hotspots, 2D editing tools, right? So that means that we can go into our symbol view here. We can delete the lines. We can delete those. We can add new ones. We can change, edit anything that's there. And in other words, we can clean up and customize this 2D symbol specifically. So what this gives you the ability to do, right, is that if I've got some specific symbols where they're really messy, even with ModelPort's cleanup, that it does, there's still some things you would like to be able to clean up a little bit better, then you can kind of get it customized the way you want it to look material-wise first. And then once you've done that, then go into this process to do the symbol. Because once I delete that and then save that, right, and use save as, don't just save, because if you save, it's still going to be using the old ModelPort format, or not ModelPort, it's still going to be recognized by ModelPort as an object. So you want to go save as, okay? And when you save as and give it a new name, then it will be completely unlinked from ModelPort, and you can just use it as a normal object in Archicad, but it will all nicely cleaned up. And this is another way that you can actually kind of combine ModelPort with a sort of standard GDL editor to get a really customized object in terms of the symbol in the end.